The room was smaller than Daniel expected. He had imagined something grand, filled with alien artwork and expensive furnishings. Instead, he found a simple space with clean lines and minimal decoration. A window dominated one wall, showing the endless stars beyond. Valith stood by that window, her back to him. She was no longer in the torn clothing from the fire. She wore robes now, elegant and flowing, marked with symbols that he assumed represented her royal status. Her injured leg was encased in a healing brace, but she was standing on her own. She turned when she heard him enter. Her luminous eyes met his, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. "You came," she said finally. "You asked me to," Daniel replied. A small smile crossed her face. "I was not sure you would. After everything that has happened, after learning who I am, I thought you might want to stay away from the complications." Daniel shrugged. "I do not care about complications. You wanted to see me. Here I am." He meant it simply, without deeper meaning. But he saw something flicker in her eyes, something warm and surprised. He was beginning to understand that his straightforward honesty was unusual to her. Among the Sindari, everything had layers. Politics and status colored every interaction. The idea of just saying what you meant was apparently revolutionary. Valith gestured to a chair. "Please, sit." Daniel sat. She moved to a chair across from him, lowering herself carefully because of her injured leg. For a moment, she just looked at him, studying his face like she was trying to memorize it. "I spoke with Inquisitor Celine," she said. "She told me about your wife." Daniel felt himself tense, but he did not look away. "She told you." "She did." "I'm sorry, Daniel. I'm sorry for your loss. And I'm sorry that you carry such pain inside you." He did not know how to respond to that. No one had apologized for his wife's death before. What was there to apologize for? It had happened. Nothing could change it. "I want to explain something to you," Valith continued. "About why I was on this station. About why I was traveling in secret." Daniel nodded, listening. "I am the third princess of the Sindari Empire," she said. "Third in line for the throne, behind my two elder siblings. My entire life has been determined by that fact. Where I live, what I study, who I speak to, who I might one day marry. Every decision has been made for me. I have never had a choice about anything." She paused, her eyes distant. "I ran away because I could not bear it anymore. The weight of expectation, the endless ceremonies and rituals, the knowledge that I would spend my entire life as a piece in someone else's game. I wanted just once to be somewhere no one knew me, to be treated like an ordinary person." Daniel thought about that. He thought about his own life, the choices he had made. Becoming a firefighter, joining the service corps, running into that burning corridor. They had all been his choices, made freely. He had never considered what it would be like to have that freedom taken away. "And then you saved me," Valith said. "A stranger. Someone who did not know I was a princess, did not care about my status or my rank. You risked your life for me because I was a person who needed help." Nothing more. She leaned forward, her eyes intense. "Do you understand how rare that is? Do you understand what it means to me? My entire life, every interaction I have had, has been colored by who I am. People bow to me, fear me, flatter me, but none of them see me. They see my title. They see my position. But you, Daniel Cole, you saw only a frightened woman trapped in a fire. And you saved her anyway." Daniel was quiet for a moment. He had not thought about it that way. To him, she had just been someone who needed help. The fact that she was a princess had never entered into his decision. "I did what anyone should do," he said finally. Valith shook her head. "No, that is not true. Not anyone would do what you did. Most people would have run. Most people would have prioritized their own survival. Even among my own people, with all our talk of duty and honor, I do not know if anyone would have done what you did for a stranger." She reached out and took his hand. Her fingers were cool against his newly healed skin. Among the Sundari, he knew now, this kind of touch was deeply meaningful. "Reserved for family. For those closest to you, I am returning home," she said. "To my people. To my responsibilities. I cannot run from them anymore. But I want to do things differently. I want to build bridges between our species, real bridges, not just political alliances and trade agreements. I want my people to understand what I learned in that fire." "What did you learn?" Daniel asked. "That humans are extraordinary," she said. "Not because of your technology or your military strength, but because of your hearts. Because you run into burning buildings to save strangers. Because you give everything for people you do not know. Because you believe, truly believe, that everyone matters." She squeezed his hand. "The Emperor wishes to honor you," she continued. "He wants to give you the Star of Valeth, the highest award we can give to someone outside our empire. It comes with lands and wealth and status. But I wanted to ask you first. What do you want, Daniel? What can we give you that would truly matter?" Daniel thought about it. He thought about lands he would never live on, wealth he did not need, status he did not want. None of it appealed to him. "I do not need any of that," he said. "I did not save you for a reward." "I know," Valeth said. "That is why I am asking. Because I want to give you something meaningful. Something real." Daniel looked at her. At this young woman who had been so afraid in the fire, who had told him to leave her behind, who was now preparing to go back to a life of duty and responsibility. He remembered what she had said about never having choices, about never being seen for who she really was. "If you want to give me something," he said slowly, "then let me give you something first. Some advice from one person to another." Valeth tilted her head, curious. "Go on, Do not let them control you," Daniel said. "Your family, your advisors, everyone who wants to use you for their own purposes. You are more than your title. You are more than your position. You are Valeth, the woman who survived a fire, the woman who asked a stranger why he would risk his life for her. Remember that. Hold on to that. No matter what happens next, remember who you are underneath all the ceremony." Valeth's eyes glistened. For a moment, she looked very young. Not a princess, not royalty, just a person trying to find her way in a complicated universe. "Thank you," she whispered. They sat in silence for a while, hands still joined. Two people from different worlds who had been brought together by fire and circumstance. Finally, Valeth spoke again. "Will you visit me? On my homeworld, I mean. Not as a dignitary, not as a hero, just as a friend." Daniel smiled. His first real smile since the fire. "I am not very good at formal events," he said. "Neither am I," Valeth replied. "That is why I need a friend who will tell me the truth. Who will see me, not my title. Will you be that friend, Daniel Cole?" He thought about his life. The empty apartment he went home to every night. The grief he carried. The loneliness he had tried to fill with work and duty. Maybe it was time for something different. Maybe it was time to build something new. "Yes," he said. "I will be your friend." Valeth smiled. It was a real smile, bright and warm, and it transformed her face into something beautiful. She extended her hand, a human gesture she had learned just for this moment. Daniel took it gently, careful of his still tender skin. They shook hands. A simple gesture, a human gesture. But for the Sundari, it was something more. A promise, a bond, the beginning of something that would echo through history. Daniel did not know it then, but this moment would be remembered for generations. The human who ran into fire to save a stranger. The princess who learned what it meant to be truly seen. The handshake that changed the relationship between two species forever. But in that moment, it was just two people. Two friends, finding hope in the aftermath of flames dawn, and sometimes that is enough to change the universe. 2 days passed. Daniel spent most of that time in the medical bay, where doctors worked on regenerating the damaged skin on his hands and clearing the residual damage from his lungs. The process was not painful, just boring. He lay in bed and stared at the ceiling and tried not to think too much about what had happened. It did not work. He thought about it constantly. The station was crawling with investigators now. Sindari's security teams had arrived within hours of the explosion, their sleek silver ships docking at every available port. Human authorities had sent their own people too, worried about being blamed for what had happened. Everyone wanted answers. Everyone wanted to know how someone had managed to plant a bomb in the diplomatic wing of one of the most secure stations in the sector, and everyone wanted to talk to Daniel. They came in waves. First, the human security officers, asking careful questions about his movements that day, his relationship with the Sindari, his reasons for running into the fire. Then the Sindari investigators, cold and formal, their questions sharper and more probing. They wanted to know exactly how he had found Valith. They wanted to know if he had any connection to her before the explosion. They wanted to know why a simple maintenance engineer would risk his life for someone he did not know. Daniel told them the truth, over and over again. He heard someone calling for help. He went to help. That was all there was to it. They did not seem to believe him. Or rather, they believed his words, but could not understand his motivations. The Sindari investigators in particular seemed baffled by his actions. They kept asking the same questions in different ways, as if hoping he would eventually reveal some hidden reason, some secret agenda. He did not have one. He was just a man who could not stand by while someone died. On the third day, a new investigator came to see him. This one was different from the others. She was an older Sindari female, her silver blue skin lined with age, her luminous eyes sharp and knowing. She introduced herself as High Inquisitor Selene, the chief investigator assigned to the case. She did not ask him about the explosion at first. Instead, she asked him about his life. Where were you born, Daniel Cole? Nevada, Daniel said. On Earth, a small town in the desert. And you were a firefighter there? For 12 years. Selene nodded slowly. She had a datapad in her hands, and he knew she was reading his file. Everything about him, laid out in cold facts and figures. Your wife died in a fire, she said. 3 years ago. Daniel felt his chest tighten. Yes, you were not there when it happened. No, I was working. A wildfire on the other side of the county. By the time I got home, it was too late. Selene watched him with those sharp eyes. Daniel felt exposed, like she could see right through him to the guilt and grief he carried inside. Is that why you do this? She asked. Risk your life for strangers. Because you could not save her. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. No one had ever asked him that question so directly. He had avoided thinking about it, avoided examining his own motivations too closely. But now, forced to confront it, he found that the answer came easily. Maybe, he said. Maybe that is part of it. I could not save my wife. I have to live with that for the rest of my life. But I can save other people. I can make sure no one else has to feel what I felt that day. If I can prevent even one person from losing someone they love, then maybe it means something. Maybe her death was not completely pointless. Selene was silent. Something had changed in her expression. The sharpness was still there, but it was tempered now by something softer. Understanding, perhaps, or compassion. Among my people, she said slowly, such thinking would be considered irrational. We mourn our dead, but we do not let their deaths shape our future actions. We accept loss and move forward. The idea of dedicating your life to saving strangers because of a personal tragedy is foreign to us. Daniel shrugged. Maybe that is why humans are different. We cannot just accept loss. We have to do something about it. We have to try to make things better, even if we know we might fail. Celine leaned back in her chair. She was quiet for a long time, studying him with those ancient eyes. Daniel waited, not sure what she was looking for or whether he was giving it to her. Finally, she spoke again. "We've identified the saboteur," she said. "A member of a political faction within our own empire. They opposed the current royal family and sought to start a war between our peoples by killing the princess on a human station. They very nearly succeeded." Daniel felt cold. "If I had not been there," he started. Celine nodded. "If you had not been there, the third princess would have died. The Sindari Empire would have demanded justice. Your people would have denied responsibility. The accusations would have escalated. Within months, perhaps weeks, our two species would have been at war. Millions would have died." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "You prevented that," she continued. "Not through politics or diplomacy, but through a simple act of courage. You ran into a fire to save a stranger, and in doing so, you may have saved more lives than you will ever know." Daniel did not know what to say. He had not thought about it like that. He had not thought about anything except getting Valith to safety. "The princess wishes to see you," Celine said. "She has asked for you specifically. Will you come?" Daniel looked down at his hands. The regeneration process was nearly complete. The skin was pink and new, tender but functional. He could still feel the ghost of the flame sometimes, the memory of heat searing his flesh. "Yes," he said. "I will come." Celine stood and gestured for him to follow. They walked through the station together, past repair crews working to fix the damage from the explosion, past security checkpoints manned by both human and Sindari guards. Everyone they passed stopped to look at Daniel. Word had spread about what he had done. He was famous now, whether he wanted to be or not. They reached a section of the station that had been converted into temporary royal quarters. Guards in ceremonial armor stood at every door. Sindari nobles in fine robes moved through the corridors, their conversations falling silent as Daniel passed. He felt out of place here. A maintenance engineer in a borrowed uniform, walking through halls meant for royalty. But Celine did not hesitate, and neither did he. They stopped at a door marked with symbols Daniel did not recognize. Celine turned to face him. "The princess asked to speak with you alone," she said. "This is highly unusual." But she was insistent. "I will be waiting outside if you need anything." Daniel nodded. His heart was beating faster than it should. He was not sure why. He had already faced fire and death. A conversation with a princess should be easy by comparison, but somehow it felt more terrifying. He took a deep breath, steadied himself, and walked through the door. The evacuation area was chaos. Hundreds of survivors from the damaged sections of the station were crowded together, some sitting on the floor, others standing in tight groups, all of them talking in a dozen different languages. Medical teams moved through the crowd like fish swimming against the current, stopping to treat wounds and check vital signs before moving on to the next patient. Daniel sat on a medical crate with his hands wrapped in cooling gel bandages. A nurse had given him an oxygen mask to help clear the smoke from his lungs. He was supposed to be resting, but he could not stop watching the corner where the medical team had taken Valith. Something was happening over there. He could hear raised voices, sharp and urgent. He saw Sindari crew members rushing in that direction, their silver-blue faces pale with shock. One of them, a male in diplomatic robes, actually fell to his knees when he reached the medical station. Daniel frowned. That was strange behavior, even for the formal and rigid Sindari. He had worked alongside them for 2 years and had never seen one of them kneel to another. Their society was hierarchical, yes, but kneeling was reserved for only the highest authorities. The emperor himself. The royal family. A cold feeling began to form in Daniel's stomach. He pulled off his oxygen mask and stood up, ignoring the nurse's protest. His legs were unsteady, but they held him as he walked toward the commotion. Other humans were gathering too, drawn by curiosity and the growing crowd of Sindari. When Daniel pushed through the edge of the crowd, he finally saw what was happening. Valeth was sitting up on her stretcher, her injured leg immobilized in a temporary cast. She looked exhausted and pale, but she was alive. That was not what made Daniel stop in his tracks. Thought it was the way everyone was looking at her. The Sindari around her had arranged themselves in a specific pattern, some kneeling, others standing with their heads bowed. The male in diplomatic robes was speaking rapidly into a communication device, his voice trembling. "The radiant daughter lives," he was saying. "Praise to the eternal throne. The third princess lives." Daniel felt the world tilt beneath his feet. Princess. Valeth was a princess. Not just any princess, but the third princess of the Sindari Empire, one of the most powerful political entities in the known galaxy. The Sindari had been traveling between stars when humans were still learning to make fire. Their empire spanned hundreds of worlds, and their influence shaped the policies of the entire galactic concordat. And Daniel had carried their princess through a burning station on his back. He must have made some sound, because Valeth turned her head and saw him standing at the edge of the crowd. Their eyes met. He saw a recognition in her gaze and something else. Guilt, perhaps, or embarrassment. The diplomatic aide noticed where she was looking and followed her gaze. When he saw Daniel, his expression shifted from reverence to something harder to read. He approached Daniel with quick, precise steps. "You," he said. "You are the human who rescued her." It was not a question. Daniel nodded anyway. The aide studied him for a long moment. His eyes moved over Daniel's burned hands, his smoke-stained uniform, his exhausted face. Whatever he saw there seemed to satisfy him, because his expression softened slightly. "You have done a great service to the Sindari Empire," the aide said. "A service beyond measure." The third princess was traveling in secret. No one knew she was on this station. If she had died here, the consequences would have been catastrophic. Daniel did not know what to say. He had not saved Valeth because of who she was. He had not even known who she was. He had saved her because she was a person in danger. Nothing more. "I did not know," he said finally. "She did not tell me." The aide's eyes widened slightly. "She did not reveal her identity? Even when you were rescuing her?" Daniel shook his head. "She just told me her name. Valeth. That is all I knew." Something passed across the aide's face. Surprise, maybe. Or wonder. Among the Sindari, identity was everything. Status and rank determined every interaction, every relationship, every decision. The idea that someone would risk their life for another person without even knowing their status was apparently difficult for him to process. "Remarkable," the aide murmured. "Truly remarkable." He turned and walked back to Valeth, bending close to speak with her in their own language. Daniel watched them talk, unable to understand the words, but reading the emotions on their faces. The aide was agitated, worried. Valeth was calm, almost serene. She kept glancing over at Daniel. Finally, the aide straightened and addressed the crowd in common tongue. "The third princess wishes to speak with the human who saved her life." Clear a path. The Sindari parted like water, creating a corridor between Daniel and the stretcher where Valeth lay. Daniel walked forward slowly, suddenly very aware of how he must look. His uniform was burned and torn. His hands were wrapped in medical bandages. He probably smelled like smoke and sweat. but Vela smiled when he reached her. It was a small smile, tired and fragile, but real. Daniel Cole, she said. It seems I was not entirely honest with you. Daniel almost laughed. A princess. You are a princess. You could have mentioned that. Would it have changed anything? She asked. Would you have tried harder to save me? Or would you have been too afraid to touch me? It was a fair question. Daniel thought about it for a moment, then shook his head. No, he said. It would not have changed anything. I would have done the same thing no matter who you were. Vela's smile grew a little wider. I know. That is why I did not tell you. I wanted to know if humans were really as strange as the stories say. If you truly help strangers without asking anything in return. And what did you decide? Daniel asked. Velith looked at him with those luminous eyes, and he saw something deep and complex moving behind them. Gratitude, yes, but also something like respect. Perhaps even the beginning of friendship. I decided that humans are the strangest species in the galaxy, she said. And perhaps the most wonderful. Before Daniel could respond, the aide stepped forward again. His face was grim now, his earlier wonder replaced by concern. Your Highness, he said, speaking in common tongue so Daniel could understand. We have received initial reports about the explosion. It was not an accident. The diplomatic wing was deliberately sabotaged. Someone tried to kill you. The words hung in the air like poison. Vela's face went pale. Daniel felt his stomach clench. Someone had tried to murder a princess of the Sindari Empire, on a station where humans and aliens worked side by side. If Daniel had not saved her, if she had died in that fire, the consequences would have been unimaginable. War between humans and Sindari. The collapse of the Galactic Concordat. Millions of lives lost in the aftermath. And it had almost worked. Who? Valith asked. Her voice was steady, but Daniel could see her hands trembling. Who did this? We do not know yet, the aide said. The investigation is just beginning. But we will find them, Your Highness. We will find them, and they will face justice. Daniel looked at Valith. At this young woman who had been so afraid in the fire, who had told him to leave her behind, who had asked him why he would risk his life for a stranger. She did not look afraid anymore. She looked angry. And beneath the anger, he could see something else. Determination. She was not just a princess, Daniel realized. She was someone who had survived an assassination attempt and was already thinking about what came next. Someone who had been running from her responsibilities but was now ready to face them. Whatever happened next, Daniel had a feeling his life was never going to be the same. He was right. He just did not know yet how right he was. They tumbled through the doorway just as a wave of heat rolled over them. Daniel kicked the door shut and heard it seal automatically behind them. For a moment, he just lay there on the cold metal floor, breathing hard, his burned hands throbbing with every heartbeat. The Sindari woman lay beside him, her injured leg twisted at an angle that made him wince. She was conscious, but barely. Her luminous eyes were half closed, and her breathing was shallow and rapid. She was going into shock. Daniel forced himself to sit up. They were not safe yet. This corridor was clear for now, but the fire was spreading through the station's ventilation systems. They needed to keep moving. They needed to reach the evacuation area where medical teams would be waiting. He crawled over to her and gently touched her shoulder. She flinched at the contact but did not pull away. What is your name? He asked. His voice was rough from the smoke. It hurt to speak, but he needed to keep her conscious, keep her focused on something other than the pain. She opened her eyes fully and looked at him. For a long moment, she did not answer. Then, very quietly, she said a word in her own language. It was musical and complex, full of sounds that human throats were not designed to make. Valith, she said again, this time simplifying it for him. You may call me Valith. Daniel nodded. I am Daniel. Daniel Cole. Can you move at all, Valeth? We need to keep going. She tried to shift her weight and gasped in pain. Her leg was definitely broken. The bones of the Sindari were more delicate than human bones, more prone to fractures. She would not be walking anywhere. Daniel did not hesitate. He moved to her side and carefully lifted her again, one arm under her knees and one behind her back. She made a small sound of protest but did not fight him. She was too weak to fight. The corridor ahead was filling with smoke, but it was thinner here than where they had come from. Daniel could see emergency lights guiding the way toward the evacuation pods. He started walking. Why? Valeth asked suddenly. Her head was resting against his shoulder, her voice barely above a whisper. Why did you come for me? You do not know me. You could have died. Daniel kept walking. He did not know how to answer that question. It seemed so obvious to him. Someone was in danger. He could help. So he helped. That was how it worked. That was how it had always worked for him, ever since he was a boy watching firefighters save his neighbor's house from burning down. Because you needed help, he said finally. That is all. You needed help, and I was there. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that surprised him. My people would not do this. The Sindari. We do not risk ourselves for strangers. Our duty is to our family, our caste, our empire. A stranger is nothing. A stranger is less than nothing. You should have let me die. Daniel felt something cold settle in his chest. Not anger exactly, but something close to it. Disappointment, maybe. Sadness. Then your people are wrong, he said. He did not say it harshly. It was just a fact. Everyone matters. Everyone deserves a chance to live. It does not matter if I know you or not. It does not matter if you are human or Sindari or anything else. If I can save someone, I will save them. That is who I am. Valeth did not respond, but he felt her arms tighten slightly around his neck, holding on just a little bit harder. The smoke was getting thicker again. Daniel's lungs were burning now, each breath a struggle. His suit's filters were failing, clogged with ash and particles. He needed to move faster, but his body was reaching its limits. The adrenaline that had carried him this far was starting to fade, and exhaustion was creeping in to take its place. He passed other survivors along the way. Some of them were being helped by emergency crews. Others were staggering along on their own, dazed and injured. A few looked at Daniel with shock in their eyes, seeing this human carrying an alien princess through the burning station like it was the most natural thing in the world. Not that. Daniel knew she was a princess. To him, she was just Valeth, a scared young woman with a broken leg who needed his help. They reached another sealed bulkhead. This one was already being worked on by a crew member from the engineering department, a young woman named Lisa Park. She looked up when Daniel approached, her eyes widening at the sight of him. Cole? What are you doing here? I thought you were in the lower decks. I was, Daniel said. Found a survivor in the diplomatic wing. She needs medical attention now. Her leg is broken. Lisa nodded and turned back to the door. Almost got it. The lockdown protocols are fighting me, but I am almost through. Daniel set Valeth down gently against the wall. His arms were shaking from the strain of carrying her for so long. His hands were a mess of blisters and raw skin. He could barely feel his fingers anymore. Valeth reached up and touched his hand. He expected her to pull back from the ruined flesh, but she did not. She held his hand carefully, her cool fingers gentle against his burns. You are injured, she said. You are badly injured. Because of me. Daniel shook his head. I have had worse. I will be fine. She looked at him with those luminous eyes, and he saw something change in her expression. The fear was still there, and the pain, but there was something else now. Something that might have been respect. Or maybe wonder. Among my people, she said slowly, choosing her words with care, there is a concept, a debt of life. When someone saves your life at great risk to their own, you are bound to them. It is a sacred bond, stronger than friendship, stronger than family. It can never be broken. Daniel did not know what to say to that. He had not saved her expecting anything in return. He had not saved her because he wanted a sacred bond or a debt or anything else. He had saved her because it was the right thing to do. I do not need your debt, he said. I do not need anything from you. Just get better. That is enough for me. Before she could respond, Lisa shouted in triumph. The door clicked and began to slide open. On the other side was a wide corridor filled with survivors and emergency personnel. Medical teams were moving through the crowd, treating the wounded and directing people toward the evacuation pods. Daniel lifted Valith one more time and carried her through the doorway. A medical team rushed toward them immediately, drawn by the sight of the injured Sundari woman. They took her from Daniel's arms and placed her on a stretcher. As they carried her away, Valith looked back at him. Her eyes met his across the crowded corridor. She was trying to say something, but the noise was too loud, the distance too great. Daniel raised his burned hand in a small wave. Then the medical team turned a corner and she was gone. He stood there for a moment, swaying on his feet, the exhaustion finally catching up with him. Another medical team approached him, concerned about his hands and his smoke-damaged lungs. He let them guide him to a treatment area without protest. He had done what he needed to do. He had saved her. That was all that mattered. He did not know yet that his life was about to change forever. He did not know that the woman he had pulled from the flames was one of the most important people in the galaxy. He did not know that his simple act of courage would reshape the relationship between humans and an entire alien empire. All he knew was that he was tired. So very tired. And for the first time in 3 years, when he closed his eyes, he did not see his wife burning. He saw luminous eyes looking at him with something like wonder, asking him why he had chosen to save a stranger, because everyone matters. He thought as the medical team worked on his hands. Because everyone deserves a chance. It was the only answer he had ever needed. Daniel Cole was elbow deep in a broken ventilation shaft when the world exploded. The sound came first, a deep boom that shook the walls and made his teeth rattle. Then came the alarms, screaming through every speaker on the station. Red emergency lights began flashing in the narrow maintenance tunnel where he worked. He pulled his arms out of the shaft and grabbed his toolkit. His communicator was already buzzing with panicked voices. Something had hit the diplomatic wing. Something had hit the diplomatic wing. Fire was spreading. The automated suppression systems were failing. Daniel started running, not toward the evacuation pods like everyone else, toward the fire. He had been a firefighter back on Earth for 12 years. In Nevada, where the summers were brutal and wildfires could swallow entire towns in hours. He had seen things that still visited him in his dreams. He had lost things that still made his chest ache when he thought about them too long. His wife had died in a house fire 3 years ago. He could not save her. He had not been there when she needed him most. After that, Earth felt empty. So he joined the Galactic Service Corps and got himself assigned to Orbital Station Harmony 7, a joint human and alien diplomatic outpost floating in neutral space. He thought fixing ventilation systems and power conduits would be peaceful. He thought he could escape the flames out here in the cold darkness, between stars. He was wrong. The corridor leading to the diplomatic wing was already filling with smoke. Other crew members were running past him in the opposite direction, their faces covered with emergency masks. Someone grabbed his arm and shouted at him to turn around. The section was lost, they said. It was going to decompress any minute. Daniel pulled free and kept going. The heat hit him like a wall when he turned the corner. The diplomatic wing was burning. Flames licked along the walls and ceiling, fed by the oxygen still pumping through the damaged systems. Bodies lay on the floor, some of them moving, some of them not. Emergency teams would come for them. Daniel pushed deeper into the inferno. He heard it then. A voice, high and desperate, calling out in a language he did not understand. Then the same voice switched to broken common tongue, the shared language of the galaxy. Help. Please. Someone help me. Daniel followed the sound. The smoke was so thick now that he could barely see. His suit's temperature warnings were screaming at him, telling him he was approaching dangerous heat levels. He ignored them. He had been in worse. He had survived worse. The voice led him to a side corridor that had partially collapsed. Debris from the ceiling had fallen in a jagged pile, and beneath it, trapped and terrified, was a young woman. Not human. Her skin was a soft silver-blue color that seemed to shimmer even in the dim emergency lighting. Her eyes were large and luminous, filled with fear and pain. She was Sindari, one of the ancient races that had founded the Galactic Concordat thousands of years before humans ever left their home planet. Her leg was pinned under a heavy beam. She was pulling at it weakly, but she could not move it. The flames were getting closer to her, creeping along the floor like hungry animals. Daniel dropped to his knees beside her. She flinched away from him at first, her eyes going even wider. "I am here to help," he said. "I am going to get you out." She stared at him like she did not understand. Maybe she did not. Her common tongue was limited, and fear was making it harder for her to think. But Daniel did not need her to understand his words. He needed her to trust him for just a few minutes. He examined the beam. It was heavy, but not impossible. The problem was the angle. He could not lift it straight up without risking more of the ceiling coming down on them both. He would have to shift it sideways while she pulled her leg free. He explained this to her as simply as he could, using gestures when words failed. She nodded, her face tight with pain. She was ready. Daniel braced himself and pushed. The metal was hot enough it burned through his gloves, and he felt the skin of his palms blister almost immediately. He did not stop. He pushed harder, his muscles screaming, his lungs burning from the smoke he was breathing despite his mask's filters. The beam shifted. Just a few inches, but it was enough. Now, he shouted. "Pull your leg out now." She pulled. She screamed in pain, but she pulled, and her leg came free just as Daniel's strength gave out and the beam crashed back down. He grabbed her arm and helped her sit up. Her leg was badly injured, maybe broken. She definitely could not walk. Daniel turned his back to her and crouched down. "Get on," he said. "I will carry you." She hesitated. He could see the conflict in her strange, luminous eyes. Among her people, he would learn later, physical contact was something sacred. It was not given lightly to strangers. But the flames were roaring now, eating through the walls, and survival has a way of overriding cultural taboos. She wrapped her arms around his neck and let him lift her onto his back. She was lighter than he expected, her bones more delicate than human bones. He adjusted his grip and started moving. The route to the evacuation area was blocked. Daniel knew this station better than anyone. He had crawled through every maintenance tunnel, every service passage, every forgotten corner of this place during his 2 years here. He knew another way. He carried her through narrow passages that were not meant for 2 people. He ducked under pipes and squeezed through gaps that barely fit his shoulders. She held onto him tightly, her breath hot against his neck, her body trembling with pain and fear. Behind them, the fire followed. They reached a sealed bulkhead. Daniel's access codes did not work. The system had locked down this entire section. Through the small window in the door, he could see other survivors gathering in the corridor beyond. Safety was right there, just a few inches of metal away. He set the Sundari woman down gently against the wall and pulled out his toolkit. There was a manual override for these doors, but it required getting into the panel and rewiring the locking mechanism. It would take time. Time they did not have leave me, she said suddenly. Her common tongue was clearer now, her voice steady despite everything. You can fit through the maintenance shaft above. You can save yourself. Leave me here. Daniel looked at her. Her silver blue face was streaked with soot and tears. She was serious. She actually expected him to abandon her. He laughed. It was a bitter, exhausted sound. That is not going to happen, he said. Then he turned back to the panel and started working. His burned hands made it difficult to grip the tools, but he had worked through worse pain before. He always had. The fire was getting closer. The temperature in the corridor was rising. The Sundari woman watched him with those strange, beautiful eyes. And he could tell she did not understand. She did not understand why this human was choosing to die with her instead of saving himself. Daniel did not have time to explain. He just needed to get this door open. He just needed to get her to safety. After that, he could rest. After that, he could finally stop running from the flames. The panel sparked. The lock clicked. The door began to open. Daniel grabbed her and pulled her through just as the corridor behind them finally gave way to the fire.